The sheer sweep of Psalm 22 is astounding. It moves from despair, hopelessness, all the way to life and faith. In 31 verses, it's as if it's the journey of a life. It moves from suffering and pain into a greater love. The Psalms were meant to be sung. This is the song of life. The Psalms were sung in worship. They're meant to be heard intoned. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. With me. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me, from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but find no rest. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. In 1955, Billy Graham went up to Canada to preach a sermon, just to a small speakers group. There was about 150 people. Billy Graham had been preaching in stadiums to thousands, but he went up there and he gave a sermon that night as people ate their dinner. And that sermon went viral. There was no internet yet. By viral, I mean that American preachers began to preach that sermon at churches all over our land. It was called the Checkmate Sermon. It became famous. As Billy sort of preached it, he talked about a painting that hangs in Paris. And he described that this painting is two people over a chessboard, sitting on each side. One is the devil, and the other one across the chessboard is a young man, maybe even just 16 or 17 years old. The devil has a triumphant, leering look on his face. The young boy's head is bowed and tears are falling down his cheeks. Clearly, the devil has just defeated him in a game of chess. It's checkmate. In a game for this boy's soul. As Billy told it, one time a great grand master of chess stopped by that museum. And he stood in front of that painting and he hated the look on the devil's face. It made him mad. And he felt so sad about the young boy losing the game of his life. But then that chess master began to study the board in the painting, looking at where the pieces were. And all of a sudden, he shouted out, "It's a lie! It's not checkmate! There's a move! There's a move!" He stood there just yelling at the painting. Apparently, the painter hadn't designed the scene perfectly. It wasn't really checkmate. And this guy saw that. And Billy went on to preach from that moment about how no matter how hard life is, and life is hard, No matter if you feel like you've lost, there's always a move. There is always a move available to you. And Billy went on to preach that move is towards Jesus. That's what Billy always preached. And I'm with him on this. No matter what's happening in your life, you always have that move. You could move towards Jesus Christ. And by Jesus Christ, I don't mean some doctrine, or I don't mean some particular church. By Jesus Christ, I mean that manifested love, that peace, that hope, that truth. You always can move towards a greater love. You always have that move. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. All who see me mock me, they sneer at me, they shake their heads. Commit your cause to the Lord, let him deliver. Let him rescue the one in whom he delights. Yet it was you who took me from the womb. You kept me safe on my mother's breast. On you I was cast from my birth, and since my mother bore me, you have been my God. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. You can always move towards Jesus. This psalm is actually offering an additional move. You can always hold on. Sometimes I think a lot of life is just holding on, persevering, not giving up. Just hold on. I've heard it said that if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Just don't make it worse sometimes in life. Just hold on. My dad used to say a word to me and my sisters all the time. I don't know if it's a word from the previous generation like that. I don't know if it's a word that's been in your life, but he said he thought it was a core value to life. So he's always teaching us that you better have stick-to-itiveness. Did you have that word in your life at all? Stick-to-itiveness. He thought it was one of the most important life skills, and he kept trying to teach it to us. He said things will get hard. Maybe things are always hard. You've got to have stick-to-itiveness. Just keep at it. Just keep at it. Somehow in this psalm, this person holds on. Couldn't be going worse for him, but he holds on. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help. Many bulls encircle me, strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their mouths at me like a ravening and roaring lion. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax, it is melted within my breasts. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to my jaws. You lay me in the dust of death. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. We're in 60 straight days of Bible study at First-Plymouth. People could just stop by for 45 minutes. Look at the different times throughout the week, 60 straight days. And I've noticed sometimes the image of God in our Bible, it can be confusing to people. And I hear a lot of people tell me these days they're not sure they believe in God. And a lot of those folks aren't around church a whole lot, and they're not sure they believe in God. And sometimes I worry that they think we take some of these images of God in the Bible literally. They're really picturesque images. And I worry maybe that's why they don't believe in God. They think God is some ridiculous thing of who could believe in it. Like, we were in Isaiah 6 earlier this week, and the image of God is, in Isaiah 6, it's this old dude on a throne with a big robe, and I worry that some people we really think God is an old dude on a throne with a robe. It's just a picturesque image. Who would believe that? Or in some of these texts we've been looking at during these 60 days, God is wrathful and angry, and God wipes out people if they're sinning, and He's judgment. God is like Zeus throwing thunderbolts, and I get it if people think we take that literally. Why would they believe in Zeus? I worry about people outside the church might not know how incredibly nuanced and sublime the Christian notion of God is. Those are picturesque images to develop our thinking, but our idea of God is so sublime in the Christian church, developed over thousands of years, that God is not some dude on a throne. God is not an object in the universe. God is not a thing in the universe. God is infinite. God is infinite and eternal. God is not in the universe. The universe is in God. Do you understand this? When you say the word God, you don't mean some dude sitting over there. God is this infinite consciousness. Everything is within the mind of God. But I get that they might think we have some ridiculous notion, and they don't believe in that. I heard Mark Twain said one time, I love this line, "It's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so that gets you into trouble." So people think that there's this silly image of God is what we're really talking about. We're not. When someone tells me they don't believe in God, quite often I just tell them, you're being very biblical. There's lots of people in the Bible that struggle with believing in God. In this psalm, there's clearly a moment where God feels so far away. This person is unsure of God. If you're unsure of God right now, you're being very biblical. I love that phrase that is used in English now. You've been hearing it. It's, "I see you." It's actually a lovely slang, "I see you." It means I understand what you're dealing with. I understand what obstacles you face. I understand your situation. I see you. It's beautiful. Well, my friends, the Bible sees you. If you're not sure about God, the Bible sees you. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. For He did not despise or abhor the affliction of the afflicted. He did not hide His face from me, but heard when I cried to Him. From you comes my praise in the great congregation. My vows I will pay before those who fear Him. The poor shall eat and be satisfied. Those who seek Him shall praise the Lord. May your hearts live forever. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. This Psalm 22 is the hidden template behind one of the most central stories in our Gospels, the story of the crucifixion. when Mark wrote the first gospel, the first story of Jesus being written down by Mark, he has Jesus in chapter 15 quoting this psalm from the cross. It's Jesus, it says the first line here, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. And you sense in the humanity of Jesus how forsaken he feels. But in the Jewish tradition, when you quote just the first line of a text, you're referring to the whole text. And so in his humanity, he's feeling forsaken, but he's also quoting a psalm that moves from desolation to hope and faith. The last word in this psalm is God has done it. This psalm alone moves from crucifixion to resurrection. Christians have struggled to understand the cross. Why did Jesus have to die? And there's multiple theories in the Christian church. Do you know the Roman Catholic Church refuses to make a doctrine of atonement or how to understand the cross? They believe there are multiple theories of atonement. It's a great mystery. But the one you've heard most, it's become ascendant. Some people think it's like the only way of understanding the cross, that God is so mad at you because you're a sinner, that God needs a blood sacrifice to cleanse you of your sin, that God has to kill his own son to justify you. And we'll sing in a hymn, we'll sing into him today that the blood washes our sins, and we think this is the only way of thinking about God, and I don't believe in that God. I don't believe in a God that needs a blood sacrifice. There's other ways to understand the cross, always has been. One of the most ancient, beautiful Christian ways of understanding the cross is not that God is like Zeus, needs a blood sacrifice. No, that God so desires that you move towards love, that God's whole purpose is to somehow allure you towards love, that in Jesus Christ He shows this full manifestation of love, and through His teachings and His mission and His purpose, you see it displayed and you begin following Him. But then He goes to the cross because He's willing to die for what He believes in rather than hurt anyone, and that by watching this Christ move to the cross, you see this vision of sacrificial love that just transforms your heart. That was one of the most ancient ways of understanding it. It's called the moral transformation theory of the cross. That when you see what He's willing to die for, His friends and everything He believes in, and you see sacrificial love, and you're changed. Well, that's a God I can believe in. Your one task, the one task of your soul, is to grow in love. Jesus upon the cross will help us grow in love. So, it's astounding, really, that the cross becomes the central symbol of love and hope for the Christian faith. Do you realize how wild this is? The cross was a method of execution. That's what it was historically. How did something that was a method of torture used by the Romans to terrorize the Palestinians, how could a method of torture become a symbol of love and hope and faith? It's almost unbelievable. I mean, to place a cross in our midst all the time is like putting an electric chair up on the wall. I mean, a method of execution. How did it get so transformed? Well, that's the very point. Even in the symbol itself, we see hate and violence transformed into something that just means love now. That's the transformation God is after in each one of us. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. Oh, this psalm is the song of life, and it speaks one of the deepest truths of our faith, that God can't stop all suffering, but God will be with you always.